Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Let us continue with our series. I hope that at least some of you have already felt curious enough to take a look at the book, get to know it, because our intention is to explore Gibran's philosophy and also to share his work with a wider audience. He is a very well-known author internationally, but not as much as he deserves, especially here in our country. Today's topic is the longest one in the book. I find Gibran truly remarkable. Because, just imagine, he speaks about love in only 2 pages, friendship in just 2.5, and work, where he was extraordinarily verbose, in 3 pages. It is impressive because not a single word is wasted. He is a poet who speaks in a very beautiful and concise way about deeply meaningful things. This is characteristic of authors who possess a certain depth, a certain wisdom, who are able to embed a great deal of meaning into just a few words. In general, speaking a lot and saying almost nothing is a sign of superficiality. You will see that Plato defined the good in just 3 or 4 words. Parmenides reached the pinnacle by defining being with 3 words: the being is. The being is, and it cannot cease to be, neither in time nor in space. Because if it ceases to be, it never was. He builds his entire philosophy upon these 3 words. You will see that Egypt, India, and Greece share this characteristic. What does Gibran have to do with this? He is a thinker of the 20th century, but he draws much inspiration from this philosophical tradition. I personally believe, and in my humble opinion, that a true poet should be a philosopher in order to have substance, and should be an artist in order to have form. To have something to say and to express it beautifully, because philosophy combined with poetry is a perfect union. He has something to say, and he says it in a truly beautiful way. The result is simply fantastic. I recommend it, even though I know you might be a bit wary of me, with these suggestions for bedside reading, since you have an encyclopedia on your nightstand. However, I insist, do not hesitate to make The Prophet your bedside book. It is truly fantastic. You can start with any topic. It is remarkable. Now that we have completed this introduction, which we do at the beginning of every lecture, I remind you that some of these lectures are already available on YouTube. This one, in fact, will also become on YouTube. We spoke about a brief biography of Gibran. I even intend, if it is of interest to you, when we have finished all the topics from the book, to dedicate one of our brief lectures to his life, because his biography is truly worthwhile. Here, we spoke only very briefly about his life, which is well worth knowing. He is a wonderful example of what he believed in, a person of great consistency, which is a remarkable quality. If you are familiar with the life of Miguel de Cervantes, he is very much like his own Quixote. Plato, too, closely resembles the characters in his myths and dialogues. These are men of great integrity, which is something quite rare in our historical context. It is worthwhile to learn about the biography of Kahlil Gibran. He was born in 1883 in Lebanon, and after his death, his body was returned to Lebanon, to the very same small town where he was born, and where, today, his tomb can be found, Shari, a village. There, he is a celebrated figure. It is a place that people visit. It must be something fascinating to see, near the monastery in the little town where he was born. His tomb is located, and he is a national hero. He makes Lebanon a perfect setting in his work. The Cedars of Lebanon. Gibran makes you want to visit Lebanon. He died in 1931 in New York. He managed to establish himself in the United States, where he arrived at the age of 17. He was a poor boy from Lebanon who did not speak a word of English. In the heart of the 19th century, it must not have been easy at all. However, he had the support of a patron, someone who supported him throughout his life. This person was the American teacher, Mary Elizabeth Haskell, who supported him until the end of his life and was very important to him. He was able to achieve success not only in literature, but also in painting. He became a highly recognized painter among the artistic movements of his time. He drew a great deal of inspiration from the paintings of William Blake. His work closely resembles Blake's art. 40 languages. At the time I was conducting this research, this number is always changing, but about 2 years ago, the Prophet had already been translated into 40 languages. And this is poetic prose. You should know that, today, one of the most difficult things in the world is a publisher publishing poetry, because people do not buy it, they do not consume it. Poetry is one of the most neglected of the arts. So, if you consider a book of poetic prose being translated into 40 languages and still continuing to sell, it is truly a marvel for this field, for this style of literature. There is still so much to be shared. It is very common for us to talk to someone about Gibran, and the person has never heard of him, or they have heard of him but do not really know what it is about. That is a loss. We cannot go without knowing Kahlil Gibran because it is truly worthwhile. The first edition had 1,000 copies. It seems the publisher only released it out of friendship with Kahlil Gibran. He said, "This is not going to sell," and it became a rarity. I cannot even say how many editions now exist in the English language, but the first edition had only 1,000 copies. "To do you a favor, I'll publish, but this won't sell," the publisher told him. Fortunately, that was not true. The Prophet is a story that basically consists of the following. It tells the life of a man, Al-Mustafa. Al-Mustafa means the chosen one, the elect. He was a wise man who possessed a considerable level of wisdom and who leaves the island where he lived to go to a city. He realizes that this city was in need of his guidance, of his wisdom. This city was called Acropolis. When he arrives there, the people do not care about his presence. He spends 12 years living in this city, as if he were a beggar or a hermit. No one wants to hear anything he has to say. After 12 years, he looks to the horizon and sees the boatman from his homeland coming. And he says, "Now I will go away. I'll return to my island." And then, the marvel that always occurs within the human being takes place. Awareness arises through contrast. We value things only when we know we're about to lose them. We always emphasize this point, which is important to understand. It is the contrast between the two planes that produces awareness. We generally understand this, and I always illustrate it with colors. You notice the color red because it ends here and here black begins. If the entire universe were red, we would not be aware of it. Sound and silence. Notice the clash. If a musical note sounded continuously throughout the universe, we would not perceive it because there is no contrast. Pythagoras used to say that it sounds, the music of the spheres. We do not perceive it because it never ceases. It does not create contrast. We realize the value of the things we have when we lose them. And we recognize the value of life in the face of death. Contrast produces awareness. When they are about to lose Al-Mustafa, people say, "He is leaving." And we never really asked him anything. People gather around him and ask him to answer some questions. These questions gave rise to an entire book. Fortunately, they're suddenly filled, all at once, with this curiosity. And that resulted in the book. This is a story. It is not real. It is a myth. This is also how the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu was born. Do you know this story? Lao Tzu was leaving China for India, riding his ox. And a border guard saw that elderly man, an old sage, riding on an ox. He was asked, "Where are you going?" "For what purpose?" "I will devote myself to my meditations on wisdom." "I have wisdom, sir. I've gathered something." "Then you are not going anywhere. Get down from your ox and write here everything you have discovered, because if you don't, you won't cross this border." Lao Tzu looked at that ragged, barefoot man and was surprised by his interest in wisdom. He deserves attention, a philosopher in a place like this. And so he got down and wrote the 81 aphorisms of the Tao Te Ching. We owe to that border guard everything that Lao Tzu gathered as knowledge. They say this is historical, but we do not know to what extent it is true. The fact is that those people did the same with Al-Mustafa. They surrounded him and said, "Until you answer our questions, you'll not pass." Each person asked a question, and each question became a chapter of the book. Gibran's intention in this book is to reveal the most important aspects of human life. He creates a list of what is essential for a person to ask themselves and find answers to before leaving this life. About love, about friendship, about justice, about laws, about work, about everything you might consider fundamental to human existence. And he responds in a very concise way. This is not good for us, because we know that we live in the age of distraction. We will go down in history by this name for our difficulty in focusing. In the 30 seconds we try to reflect on these roses. Other thoughts come in, like the grocery list, the weekend activities. Everything gets mixed in. We are addicted to distraction. Imagine a man who sets out to speak about love in just 2 pages. If you get distracted for 30 seconds, think of how much you've missed. So, there's no room for distraction. This is extremely difficult for us. We have to keep our attention fixed and chew over every single word. My intention is to draw a bit from philosophy, and, by looking at each word he said, try to uncover the meaning. In general, there is no one who has read Kahlil Gibran and has not been dazzled by the beauty of his words. To glimpse beauty is one thing, to understand it is another. There are passages that are absolutely obscure. If you do not have some philosophical foundation, what we try to do is take Gibran from 2D and bring him into 3D to give a third dimension, with the philosophical depth that he possesses. I am not making artificial connections. He refers to Greek philosophy. Gibran read Plato. When I say, this relates to such and such in Plato, I have no doubt that he was familiar with it. He was a great admirer of philosophy. Not only Western, but also Eastern. He makes reference to various traditions. It is important to remember, before we enter our story today, that this is a myth. Why is this information important? For us today, this may not seem very significant, but it is essential to understand that, within philosophy, a myth is not just a made-up story. A myth is a projection of what happens within a human being, cast outward so that it can be seen. A myth always has a single character. It is your own consciousness dialoguing with all the elements that live within you. If these elements inspire admiration in you, they represent your virtues. If these elements provoke rejection, they represent your vices. The characters in myths are internal elements that we have projected outward so that we can see them. Aristotle spoke about this. Today, we are no longer familiar with this tradition. Myths do not have many characters. It is only you. I also find Jung important, a thinker from the last century. A great lover of myths. He used to say the following: your dreams, the dream consciousness, those more lucid dreams, are like this as well. There are not many people in your dream, it is only you. If you are speaking with a character who inspires you with wisdom, that is the highest point of your consciousness. That which disgusts you, that laziness, that instinct you cannot control, but all of it is you. It is as if Al-Mustafa, at the end of a 12-year cycle, because 12 is a zodiacal cycle, which represents a cycle of human life, were gathering all the elements he had collected in his consciousness throughout his life, and taking stock of everything he has learned. You may have heard that Plato has a book. I do not recommend reading it, but if you do, read it as the last on your list, because it is extremely complex, the Timaeus. The Timaeus is not easy. It is a book as if Plato wrote it. As Professor Michel Echenique, who was the director of New Acropolis, used to say, a book for grown-ups. It is highly symbolic and very difficult to understand, but there is something we can grasp that is quite interesting. He says that the most perfect geometric figure that exists is the circumference, because it has a center and all points are equidistant from that center. This is a very effective symbol of wisdom. A center, which is the wise person, the consciousness that has attained wisdom. This center attends to all the elements of your life in an equal manner and illuminates them with wisdom, whether it is your family life, your relationships with people at work, your interactions in general, your thoughts, your emotions. Everything is equally attended to by that central light. Your entire life is illuminated by this center of wisdom. when everyone is gathered in a circle around Al-Mustafa. It is as if all the elements of his life are illuminated by wisdom. He is a sage who has harmonized all the things in his life around him. This is a myth that unfolds in the human being. And finally, another interesting element is to realize that every time there is a question, the person who asks is directly connected to what is being asked. It is always a character who has a direct interest in that subject. And this character also exists within us. Now speaking about work. This is one of the longest chapters in the book, but not exactly. Because even the longest chapters in the Prophet are just 2 pages. He presents a perspective on work that is very different from what we know today. There is not a single chapter by Gibran that does not surprise us. It is almost as if we are being taught to read all over again. Ask yourself what you would say about friendship, and then see what Gibran says. He goes in a completely different direction. In most cases, what we call love, he goes one way and we will another. Since these are 2 positions from common sense and each goes in a different direction, one of them must be wrong. It is a logical matter. 2 thoughts so different cannot both be right. Who could it be? Who could be more right? Who sees with greater depth? This is a reflection. I am not here to say Gibran held absolute truth. I have a hunch about who is closer to the truth. I knew absolutely nothing. It is as if I were reconstructing all the elements of our lives. Here at work it is no different. Let us turn to our poem. It is here on the screen in its entirety. Then the farmer said, "Speak to us of work." Evidently, he is a man who works the land and wanted to know what the spirit of work truly is. He begins to answer all the questions. You will notice that, in this chapter, he places a very strong emphasis on what we now consider to be associated with work. The very word work. As you may have heard, since this is often discussed, has its origin in tripalium, or 3 stakes, which was an instrument of torture used in the Latin world. The word work was, in the past, associated with slavery. Not all work in Rome was performed by slaves, but it was this notion of slave labor that gave rise to our current word. It is something you are forced to do, and if there were no coercion compelling you, you would not do it. We have this notion that happiness is carpe diem, enjoy your day, do nothing. The less you do, the better. We get the impression that the world is entirely in conflict. If you stop to notice, you will see that the positions people hold in the world, whether they are those who work to defend the interests of employees or those who defend the interests of employers, in general, they all converge on the same point. Everyone wants to work less and earn more. What does an employer want? To do absolutely nothing and earn as much as possible, to have a huge profit margin. Employees push to reduce their workload and increase their wages. In general, it is unanimous. Everyone wants to work less and earn more. Work is regarded as a form of torture. And what is the great paradise that everyone eagerly awaits? Retirement. The day I free myself from this yoke, then I will be happy. This is quite curious and very interesting. In fact, I once gave a lecture solely about this topic. I mentioned to you, in one of those lectures, that there is a doctor who developed a theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but I found his perspective very interesting. People spend their whole lives saying, "The day I stop working, I will do nothing. I'll put my feet up and I will do nothing. Happiness is the dolce far niente. In other words, I will do nothing." He says that people don't realize there is a mental programming. When you keep insisting on this your whole life, there is only one way for you to do nothing, and that is to be dead, because if you are alive, you are always doing something. There is a very high incidence of people who die within 2 years after retirement. This is a statistical fact. Aren't people programming themselves for this outcome? When you tell your body, I will not do anything, how do you think it interprets that? It wants to die. It's as if it were a kind of mental programming, because anyone who is alive is doing something. The other idea is, when I retire, then yes, I will do what I have always dreamed of. Then something quite interesting begins, which is called the retiree's circuit. The person starts ballroom dancing, then gives up. Starts traveling, gets tired. Tries handicrafts, gives up again. You can tell that they have closed this circuit when they start visiting their former workplace. This is a sign that they have realized that it was good there. In reality, it's not about being good or bad. It's that nothing in the world exists without duality. Do you think there is any place in the world, any task, any role, that doesn't have both uncomfortable and comfortable aspects? When we idealize things, we only see what is pleasant about them. We don't see the other side. When we actually experience them, we realize that everything has a flaw. Perhaps what is easiest is what I have already mastered. Maybe letting nature choose for me is wiser than choosing for myself. It could be that nature knows more about my needs than I do, or that nature knows me better than I know myself. Because sometimes we die as strangers to ourselves. Ultimately, this idea of work today is something complex. Because it has truly become a punishment, a torture, and liberation is seen as doing nothing. It's curious you notice the entire universe is in a state of evolution. We see that, for example, in the mineral kingdom, the experience of stones is inertia. The experience of plants is to absorb energy, to perform photosynthesis. The experience of animals is an emotional world. The experience begins as they enter the mental world. When a person considers happiness to be doing nothing, they are equating themselves to a stone. In other words, going back to the past, because inertia is the happiness of the mineral kingdom. Fulfillment consists in bringing into reality the idea for which we were created. Human beings were not created to be inert. Inertia is very good in a diamond. It produces the hardest of all stones. But in a human, it is laziness. Inertia was not meant to be applied to humans, but to stones. We don't have a reference of who we are and what corresponds to us. We don't bring it to reality. And we do not fulfill ourselves. He will address this division between what work is and our conception of work. You work to keep pace with the rhythm of the earth and the soul of the earth, for to be idle is to become a stranger to the seasons and to fall out of step with the procession of life. The entire universe vibrates. There is an Egyptian maxim from Hermes Trismegistus, which says that the whole universe is vibration. Everything vibrates. There was also a Greek thinker who mentioned this, Heraclitus. Everything in the universe vibrates. You can notice this, for example, in your own body. If something in your body refuses to do its part, that alone may be enough to compromise the entire body. All the life within your body is sustained by rhythms, the heartbeat, the peristaltic rhythms of the intestines, the rhythm of breathing of the lungs. Heart can't say, now I want to take a vacation. I want to retire. It can never lose its rhythm because it has a commitment to life. Life is sustained by rhythm on every level. Everything has its own unique rhythm. Minerals, for example, vibrate in one way. Plants vibrate in another. This is identity. It is something complex. It is an Egyptian concept, which they called the inner name. The deepest identity of beings is to find the rhythm of vibration that nature dreamed for them. Human beings should vibrate generating values, virtues, and wisdom. They should resonate with fraternity, honesty, and generosity. Animals with their instincts. Plants with energy. Minerals with the potential for resilience. When each one vibrates by fulfilling its own role, it is like an orchestra. You produce a musical chord. Everything's in harmony. When you remove something that does not vibrate in the way that nature intended for it, you put the orchestra of the universe out of tune. At this moment, the orchestra of nature on earth is out of tune. Who is not vibrating in the right rhythm? Who is the one out of tune in this story? Could it be the stones? Could it be the plants? Nature needs a plant, and it fulfills its role. It needs an animal, and it fulfills its role of survival instinct and instinct to perpetuate life. Nature needs human beings who generate values, virtues, and wisdom. Where are the people to answer? Present. There is a void, an emptiness, someone out of tune in this orchestra. This throws the entire symphony of the universe out of tune. It breaks the harmony. At this moment, human beings lack identity. It is as if we take animal instincts and add a mind to amplify those instincts, rather than achieve a truly human purpose. So, we have become rational animals, as the scientific term suggests. That is, instinctive beings who use the mind to intensify those instincts. This is worse than a lion. This is worse than any predator. The mind is truly valuable when it is directed toward a human purpose. The entire universe vibrates. It has its own rhythm. When each thing finds its true nature, it enters into harmony. This question of harmony and disharmony is truly fascinating. Philosophers of the past, or great political figures such as Julius Caesar, when he was about to embark on a military campaign and noticed that things were falling into harmony, that is, if he needed a weapon, there was a blacksmith to make the weapon. If he needed a soldier for a certain position, he would find that person. When he saw that nature was enhancing his work, he would say, "I am heading in the right direction. My progress in this direction is generating harmony. Nature is bringing me the tools I need. But if I move in a certain direction and doors keep closing and I have to force doors open, and they keep closing again, I am creating disharmony. There must be something wrong there. I must not be heading in the right direction. Nature is not generating a synchronicity that supports what I am doing. It is not her interest what I am doing. It is my own selfish interest. When a person finds their place in the universe, what they do is good for themselves and good for the whole. As they move forward, nature provides the necessary tools. Jung called this synchronicity. You move the universe to bring you the tools you need. Because your well-being is the well-being of the whole. You are in harmony. But if you are out of tune, no one will give you another musical instrument in this orchestra. If they give you another musical instrument, it is because you are in tune. They empower you because you are in harmony. This is Jung's synchronicity. Synchronous events. Fairy tales speak a lot about this. The prince goes to save the princess. He needs a sword and finds one embedded in a stone. He needs a cloak and finds one that an old man gives him. He is armed and clothed along his journey. Because his direction is just, noble, and good, it serves the interests of the universe, not a selfish purpose. In fact, when we talk about children in a lecture on Gibran, there is a very beautiful passage that says that the relationship nature has with human beings is the one we should have with the people we love. For example, with children, nature comes to its children and says, "To rise, to evolve, to grow, count on me. Descend alone." Isn't that interesting? If you want to grow, nature is with you. Nature tells you, if you work with a greater purpose, I am with you, I add to your efforts. Selfishness? Go alone. If you find yourself walking too much on your own, stop and consider whether your purpose is not too selfish. He continues, when you work, you are a flute, through which the whisper of the hours turns into melody. Who among you would choose to be a silent reed when all else sings in unison? In other words, the entire orchestra is in tune, and yet you have no melody, no sound, you do not harmonize. All of nature constantly emits every kind of energy, every kind of raw material. There is a very interesting thinker named Sri Ram from the last century, who said that the things that come to you are not meant to stay with you. You are like a station for enriching the gifts of life. This very beautiful expression means that life gives you things, not for you to keep them, but to enrich them, to add your potential, and to pass them on, to deliver the flow of life. things pass through you to be enriched. That is, for you to work on them, refine them, and enhance them with your potential, and send them out into the world. We are a station for enriching the gifts of life. If you hold on to the gifts of life, you will lose them. And they lose their meaning. Things pass through you and leave you better than they arrived. I always share this with you because it is something very beautiful, and, in several talks, we have already discussed this. A story in which Beethoven, already completely deaf. Can you imagine a composer who is completely deaf? He said, "I do not take my own life because I feel that I still have a mission to fulfill. God gave me a message to deliver to humanity, which is my music, and I haven't finished delivering my message. So, I cannot die now." None of us is Beethoven, but we each have a message to give to humanity. A message that only we can deliver, and that is our work. When we enrich these energies, this wind that enters through our flute and emerges as melody. When we enrich the gifts of life, we are leaving our mark on the world. We add, we make a difference. We do not live in vain. I always speak to you about that Taoist phrase from Lao Tzu, who said that life is like a reed, a flute, where the breath of the spirit enters and must come out as pure air. If we are all blocked inside, the breath of the spirit enters and only dust comes out the other side. The light of the spirit enters and light must come out. If we are all obstructed within, the light of the spirit enters and what comes out is shadow. Shadows were born in the world because people became opaque. They filled themselves with obstructions. Obstruction is selfishness. It is a lack of fraternity, a lack of generosity, a lack of capacity to love. We will talk a lot about this because Gibran closely associates work with love. The gifts of life come in, and you must turn them into melody, offer melody to the world. Because this melody justifies your existence. I left melody in the world. I did not exist in vain. You have always been told that work is a curse and labor a misfortune. But I tell you that when you work, you fulfill part of the earth's most distant dream, thus carrying out a mission that was given to you when this dream was born. And by dedicating yourself to work, you are, in truth, loving life, and whoever loves life through work shares in the most intimate secret of life. When nature was created, it was to give every being the opportunity to grow toward that dream. Every being has a dream. Nature created all beings so they could reach perfection. It is as if she created all stones to become diamonds, all humans to be generous, fraternal, and upright. She created all beings to walk toward their ideal. Nature is idealistic. When a being grows, it sets an example for all those who are inspired by it. Plato used to say that the best thing you can do for the people you love is to grow, because only then can you provide them with a true reference for life. The best thing you can do for those who love you is to grow as a person. Hold on to this idea, which for Gibran is of utmost importance. I have already told you that he has another beautiful book, which is the collection of letters he exchanged with Mary Haskell, where he speaks concretely about this subject. Human beings, and all beings as a whole, came into the world for a fundamental purpose, which is the construction of themselves, and if they have not done this, they have done nothing at all. If you came into this world and did not shape yourself to be more like the model of the ideal human being, if you didn't approach ideal, in short, your life amounts to nothing, because this is the great task of all creation. It is as if you imagine the following: we are educators, and we decide to reform high school, extending its duration from 3 to 5 years. We are going to add another subject. We are going to reform high school. It already exists in the realm of ideas. No one has started the course yet. But in the realm of ideas, what will be studied in the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth years already exists, as well as the skills that a person reaching the 5th year must possess. Imagine that nature did the same with the condition of all beings, including human beings. Before the first human being existed, Nature had already envisioned this process in the realm of ideas. How this process begins, how it progresses, what an ideal human being is. And it waits for someone to fulfill this journey. From the starting point, which is that rougher being, almost like an animal, to a being who is pure value, virtue, and wisdom. Nature dreams of this. It's existed in the realm of ideas since the universe was created. It is the ideal of each thing. This is intuitive. It may seem complicated, but it is not. This is the obvious. I remember that, many years ago. I won't even tell you how many years, so you don't figure out my age. As if that were some kind of mystery. I was teaching a philosophy course. This story is well known, and to me, it was very amusing. Every time someone asks me a bizarre question, it gives me 20 years' worth of examples. I was teaching a class on an Eastern tradition, the Bhagavad Gita, a beautiful book from India, which depicts a war. In reality, this war is a myth that exists in the human being, between their virtues and their flaws, and I spoke about this need for a person to struggle in order to build themselves. Fight one's own inertia and weaknesses. In the classroom there was a young man, only 17 and not of legal age. He said, "I am satisfied with who I am. Why I will fight to be better if I'm happy the way I am? Why waste time on that? I like being who I am, just the way I am. Why would I struggle to become better?" It's quite amusing to see a 17-year-old boy satisfied with who he is. I started wondering how I will honestly explain this to that young man. I thought of the following scenario. Imagine that he has a certain amount of money and wants to buy a stereo system. And I tell him, I have one at home to sell, but it has a few issues. The turntable is a bit crooked. The radio doesn't pick up all the stations. But the rest is great. The rest? With the money he has, he wouldn't be able to buy a stereo like this one. He's going to want to buy a stereo as close as possible to the ideal one. That is, one with good definition, good quality, and durability. He wants the ideal stereo. He wants the ideal car, or at least the closest thing to it. He wants the ideal house, not a house that will collapse on his head. He demands that everything be ideal, but when it comes to himself, he accepts being anything at all. Isn't that curious? For himself, he accepts anything. If we have something that is nowhere near ideal, like this stereo, I should have already thrown it in the trash. Why would we be an exception in the universe? Won't nature throw us into a great cosmic landfill because we are of no use? If we do not fulfill our role, if we do not embody the identity that nature dreams for us, all of us have a need for the ideal. Why do we only seek it in things and not within ourselves? Why must we settle for being just this and not allow ourselves to dream big, to become so much more, to have a human ideal and pursue it? Because, according to Gibran, this is what life is about, the construction of oneself. And if you do this, it is the best thing you can do for everyone else. Because you provide an example that this is possible. You offer a reference point that this is achievable. The one who is devoted to their work is, in truth, loving life. This is the law of life. Life dreams that all beings will build themselves and move forward toward their ideal. Elena Blavatsky, who was a great philosopher of the 19th century, used to say that, if you imagine the cosmos, the universe in all directions, there must be countless beings. Because life does not exist only here, there must be life in other directions as well. There must be innumerable beings. I do not know what they are saying. I do not know the language they speak, but I know what they are talking about. The only important thing that is said in all four corners of the universe is, we need to return home and progress toward unity. It does not matter what language they use to say this, but this is what they are talking about. We need to grow. Is there anyone who has a subject more important than this in all four corners of the universe? I do not know what language, but they are talking about this because this is a universal law. We must return home and to unity. This is the law of life. It is the most intimate secret of life. It is what the Old Testament says, to return to the Father's house with arms full of fruits. everything that our conscience has gathered along the way to return to unity. In all four corners of the universe, it must be this way. But if, in your suffering, you call birth an affliction, and the necessity of bearing the flesh a curse inscribed upon your brow, then I will tell you that only the sweat of your brow will wash away that stigma. Indeed, it is not easy to be in the world. Truly, it is extremely complex for us to imagine that we have a body, and that within it there is energy, emotions, thoughts, all of this vibrating, and suddenly it disappears and no one knows where it went. No matter how many doctrines we have to explain it, this remains paradoxical. Where does life go, and where did it come from before? What is the meaning of all this? What are the rules of the game? Within us, there is a restlessness to understand all of this, and at the same time, the difficulty of the material existence we carry. If I ask you to think about your homes, in a moment, you think of them and return here. Now, try taking your body home. It's difficult. You have to get up, walk, take some form of transportation. It is inert, it is organic matter that we carry back and forth. It is difficult, and sometimes it immobilizes us. When we begin to understand the meaning of life, sometimes time is already running short. There are only two ways for you to do what is yours to do. In some way, you will have to water the earth, either with your sweat or with your tears. If you do not want to spend your life endlessly fighting against nature because of life's pains, work to ease the suffering of those who come after you. Work to build a smoother path for yourself, not for your own sake, but for those who will follow. Think more as a whole. That is, fulfill your purpose. Share your message. Because, in any case, this is inevitable. We came here for this, although people have different perspectives and values. I am convinced that humanity came into this world to move from ignorance to wisdom. What else could we be here to do? And if this is truly our purpose, then let us begin to fulfill it now. Why postpone it? Why go through it with more pain? The more time passes, the more difficulties we accumulate. The moment we become aware is the moment to begin our journey. We are here to carry out a fundamental task, which is the construction of ourselves. This is inevitable, so let us begin now, since we understand. The Egyptians have a book called the Book of the Dead, which contains a phrase. When I don't understand something, and there are many things I don't understand, I memorize it, because one day I will comprehend it. Sometimes I understand, other times I do not. This phrase said, more or less, the following: O disciple, when you awaken, rise and run. Reading Plato and other authors, I saw that what it meant was that when you awaken, when you realize the meaning of life, get up and make the most of your time. Do not waste time in vain. Say, I will get up and make the most of my time, because this is the meaning of life and I will not waste any more time. No one has given me a convincing argument that the meaning of life is not this. A suggestion anyone. Human beings came into this world to move from ignorance to wisdom, and when one attains wisdom, they offer a service to all other beings, because there is no serious problem on Earth today that is not the result of ignorance and selfishness. Ecological problems of every kind, problems affecting fauna, flora, and all you imagine, stem from predatory human behavior, from people neglecting responsibilities. They come from selfishness. Today, the idea is widespread that the great problem of modern humanity is believing in dogmas. When people are very afraid of dogmas, it is because they are already dogmatized. There is a very beautiful story. If you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. I am trying to convert some people into opera enthusiasts, but I haven't succeeded with anyone yet. There is a Mozart opera, The Magic Flute, in which there are two characters. A prince who wanted to become more noble, and the other, Papageno, a bird catcher, who only wanted a girlfriend and to survive. Today, if you tell people that there is something better than just surviving comfortably, they get offended. That is a dogma. People are afraid of dogmas, yet they are already dogmatized. If you say that there is something better than staying in your comfort zone, than pursuing your personal interests, they get offended. That is a dogma. People are dogmatized down to the last strand of hair. Why are they so afraid of dogma? I will study Platonic philosophy. I will dogmatize myself. But you are trading one dogma for another because you are already dogmatized. Try, seek something different. Try to reflect. Try to search for answers. If, later on, you come to the conclusion that Plato was a fanatic, that he was deceiving you, you can change, but at least you have broken the chains of the cave, as Plato himself says. You have tried to leave the collective unconscious. You have tried to see life through your own eyes. Do you realize that, Plato? If you don't agree, it's his fault. I even always give the website. Write to him. He used to say that those who talk a lot about food are hungry. Those who talk a lot about freedom are imprisoned. In general, in society, people talk about dogma all the time. Sometimes you enter a university and there, people say that religions are dogmatized. Religions are considered dogmatized because they believe that truth is what is written in a book. Most of those people believe similarly. The author is different. They have no practical experience at all. They have memorized what Martin Heidegger or Edmund Husserl said. They have no practical experience of any of it. They believe it's simply because someone said so, only the author changed. Do not be so afraid. Try, take risks. If it doesn't work out, change. No one is imprisoning you when you try to think. You are imprisoned when you do not think, because then you have already become dogmatized. Those who do not commit to anything are already committed to the worst of all causes, which is the cause of the alienated. Embrace the experience of reflection. It is worth it. You might make mistakes, but you learn even from your mistakes. No one is imprisoning you. Try something else. You have been told that life is darkness, and, in your weariness, you repeat what the weary have told you. And I tell you that life truly is darkness, except when there is an impulse. He will continue with this reflection. Life is, indeed, darkness, except when there is an impulse. Why is there no darkness here, at this moment? Because there is a light in this lamp. Where did this light come from? It came from water that was flowing, an energy of nature that was moving. Someone went there and intelligently held back that water. Builds a dam. Intelligently releases that water, drawing energy from it, which creates an impulse that generated this light here. The force that nature gives you, when worked intelligently, enriches the gifts of life and generates light. This is a symbolism, and what he will say, in continuation, fits very well with this example of the dam. And every impulse is blind, except when there is knowledge. And all knowledge is vain, except when there is work. And all work is empty, except when there is love. The barrier is there and the water is flowing. The person comes and, with wisdom, holds back the water, leaving a spillway through their work so that this energy can be harnessed. When this energy is harnessed, it generates light. There you have knowledge, work, and love. In a continuum, work, necessarily, when done in the right direction, leads to love. It is constructive, it generates more light for humanity. If your work does not generate light for yourself or others, it is not work, it is mere mechanical repetition. It is like Charlie Chaplin's Bull Tightener. Work is love. Any object you build through work will not last for more than just a few years. This house, these chairs, this table, none of these things will last forever. But the love that I put into this work can remain imprinted in human beings for eternity. That is, the essence of what will endure in the work is the love you invested in it. You have probably heard these stories many times because they are very common. One story we love to share in our philosophy course is that of the two cathedral builders. There were two men working on the Chartres Cathedral in France. Some monks came to speak with them as they were both building the same wall. They asked the first man what he was doing. "I'm building a wall to earn coins," he replied. Then they asked the second man what he was doing. He paused, looked up, and answered, "I'm building a temple." The temple is present in every stone he lays there, and these stones are not the same as those of the first man. It is infused in all things, in the state of mind of the one who created them. It is curious, it is interesting, when we study a city like Rome. A paterfamilias would never move into a house with his family if someone had already lived there, without first performing an entire process to cleanse the environment, not only on the physical level, but also on the emotional level. Even unknowingly, everything carries people's emotions. With their thoughts, these emotions may or may not be good. If they are good, they are wonderful. When they are not good, they can harm life. When they are good, they can create life. We can leave in all things the imprint of who we are, as a message to humanity, as a legacy. Whoever is willing to inherit, to receive this legacy, will begin where we left off, not starting from zero, as this is inexorable. There are even some individuals who actually possess unusual, paranormal gifts, who touch an object and are able to read the history that is imprinted on that object. Someone passed through here and did such a thing. I do not know whether this is true or not. If this is true, it means that our emotions and thoughts become imprinted on things, for better or for worse. The spirit with which we do things does not simply build objects. Those will eventually disappear. It builds people. It helps to shape human beings. Much of who we are today comes from the efforts of many people who came before us, even though we may not be aware of it. How many people have we mentioned here tonight? Don't we owe a debt to these people? How many thinkers? It was their work that helped us reach the point where we are now. All work is empty, except when there is love. And what does it mean to work with love? It is to weave the fabric with threads unraveled from your own heart, as if your beloved were to wear that fabric. How beautiful that is! That thinker I mentioned to you, Sri Ram, used to say the following: "You must lose your heart every day, and spend your whole day searching for your heart. When you reach the end of the day, you will realize that your heart is the heart of all things." Do you know what that means, to lose your heart and look for it everywhere? This means that everywhere you go, a little bit of your heart will remain. That is the essence of work. If you don't put your heart into your work, you have accomplished nothing. To take something from one place and move it to another, and then bring it back to the same place, in time that will cease to exist. To build or destroy, all of that will pass away. But if we leave love infused in the things we do, that is an eternal law, one that will never cease to exist. Let me share with you another example, which happened some time ago in a classroom. I remember a student once told me something that at the time I found quite strange. She said the following: nature, through a process of natural selection, eliminates everything that falls into disuse. If any part of an animal's body goes unused for several generations, it ceases to exist. I think that, over time, nature will eliminate love, since we don't use it for anything. It will fall into disuse and be eliminated in later generations. And she was a young woman, very young. I was deeply struck by that, because it's a very narrow view of love. What does she think love is? Just kisses between lovers? What is love? If you take a moment to look for love throughout your day and do a bit of what Sri Ram spoke about, you will see how it is present in the smallest details, or else things simply do not flow. This morning, I was walking past a bank and saw an elderly lady with a cane, whom I had never seen before in my life. She looked at me and said, "Good morning." That "good morning" was overflowing with love. She saved my day, because I would not have realized how precious a day truly is. Wasn't that an act of love? I remember once I was at a snack bar and someone approached the counter and placed some napkins and sauce on it and said to me, "Enjoy," because I didn't even touch them. I looked at that simple gesture and thought, this is an act of love. You know those doors with a spring that open and close? Someone walked by, saw another person coming behind them, turned back and held the door. Isn't that an act of love? If life were full of these little gestures, what kind of life would we have? The smallest thing, someone looks at you and says, "Good morning." Love is not just kisses between lovers. Love is something that is embedded in the footsteps of a truly human being. You look and say, "A human being has passed through here. There is a little flower in the valley. Here, there is a little flower in the vase." How much of a difference that makes. When someone holds the door, when someone looks into your eyes and says, "Good morning," when someone returns something that was untouched, that was not used, when someone uses an object and, silently, says, "Thank you for having served me." That person respects things and people. When someone treats the things that serve them with care, they respect everything because they respect themselves. Even entering the elevator can be an act of love. Letting people exit before you enter. Caring about their needs. Once, I heard an interesting story about a person who would hold down the elevator button so it would go straight to their floor. And people would get upset about this. But when someone takes the time to hold the elevator so another person can catch it, that is love. Imagine this spirit were present in everything we do. Love is life. Without love, existence becomes a brutal, animalistic survival. For humanity, this is not a suitable environment for life. We are no longer at the stage where we should live this way. We create disharmony for the universe as a whole, because brutality amplified by reason is worse than a wild lion. A wild lion doesn't have a mind to intensify instincts, but we do. Do not think that love is something limited. Imagine if you removed love from everything. What would life be like then? We have reduced love to something sentimental, shared only among a small group of people. Love is life. Love is a unifying force that compels ourselves to strive until the very last moment, to give us an opportunity to experience the world. Love is health, love is strength, love is justice, love is harmony on every level, and without it, there would be no life. It elevates life to another level. Love is what truly unites, because the purpose of evolution is unity. Continuing with this same logic, it is to build a house with affection, as if your beloved were going to live in that house. It is to sow seeds with tenderness and to gather the harvest with joy, as if your beloved were going to eat its fruits. And to put into everything you do a breath of your soul, as if your beloved were going to receive that breath, because, in truth, they will. We have a commitment which says that every human being has this implicitly within themselves. Even the very last of humanity should fit within our hearts. The love that I leave imprinted in this object, in some way, will reach someone whom I may not touch directly. Even the last of all human beings should fit within our hearts. This is the wise one. All of humanity is their family. It fits within their heart. Therefore, wherever they leave love, whoever receives it becomes their beloved. In that very moment, wherever they leave love, whoever receives it is their beloved. It is an opportunity to allow your love to reach further through your work. Work is the far-reaching extension of your love. And if it is not that, it serves no purpose. Many times, I have heard you say, as if you were speaking in your sleep, "The one who works with marble and finds in the stone the shape of their soul is nobler than the one who tills the earth. And the one who captures the rainbow and stretches it across the canvas in human forms is superior to the one who crafts sandals for our feet. A sculptor, a painter, are considered superior to a sandal maker or a farmer. The law of necessity makes everything that helps a human being become a little better, good. That which makes justice, beauty, harmony, health, all of this follows the law of necessity. Valid work does as well. Within a theater, there is a person playing the piano. Needed someone to prepare that piano. to carry that piano, to set up that stage, to bring those flowers. Is it just the pianist? Does a pianist build a piano? Love is present in every stage, so that you can arrive and witness the one who finishes by playing the keys. He is simply the one who gives the final touch in a chain of processes, where each person contributed something. The creation of everything necessary for humanity is an act of dignified work. It is an act of love. However, I tell you, not in slumber, but in the full awakening of midday, that the wind does not speak more sweetly to the mighty oaks than to the smallest blade of grass. And truly great is only the one who transforms the howling of the wind into a song made gentler by their tenderness. The one who knows how to infuse tenderness into the things that pass through their hands, to the extent of their possibilities, their talent, their abilities. Imagine a nest of galaxies surrounding us. Does the universe know where greatness ends and smallness begins? Where is this boundary? A customs border between the great and the small. Where is it? You might say to me, it's in the galaxies. And I answer you, there are walls made of nests of galaxies. You tell me, it's in the walls. And I reply, there are clusters of walls. Where does the small begin, and where does it end? Nature does not have this boundary. What is the difference between an atom, a galaxy, and a solar system? Does nature consider one more or less important than the other? Do you realize what we do when we break the nucleus of this atom? Or how many great things it can destroy? Have you ever seen the Big Bang Theory, where everything emerged from an infinitesimal point? Where does nature draw the boundary between the small and the great? It sets the boundary between what is valid and what is not, between what contributes to the growth of the universe and what does not, regardless of size. And if it contributes, it is valid, it is just, it is dignified work imbued with love. Professor Jorge Angel Livraga, founder of New Acropolis, had a saying about the pyramids of Egypt. The city of Cairo was built in the old days, primarily by taking stones from the pyramids and from temples, which made people indignant about it, and he used to say the following: there have always been, and there will always be, throughout history, builders of pyramids and destroyers of pyramids. The question is for you to decide which group you will join, which of the two you will take part in. These two things have always existed. There is no great or small. There are those who build and those who do not build. Work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with love, it would be better for you to leave your work behind and sit at the door of the temple, begging alms from those who work with joy. In other words, if you consider that what you do becomes infused with your state of mind, perhaps it would be better not to do things at all than to do them filled with reluctance or hatred, because we will leave that mark on the world. There is an old, very interesting, and funny movie called Like Water for Chocolate. Have you heard of this film? The young woman was an excellent cook, and everything she cooked became so deeply infused with her state of mind. One day, she was disheartened by lost loves, and everyone who ate her food ended up crying and lamenting the loves they had lost in life. It's very funny, but in a certain way, this is true. Things become imbued with the state of mind with which we create them. At New Acropolis, our work is voluntary. We do not hire anyone to hand out our flyers on the street. A person who understands what New Acropolis is, handing out a flyer, is better than someone who is paid to distribute 1,000 flyers. They know what they are doing and hand out the flyer with that state of mind, offering you something that was precious to them. A flyer handed out in this way is better than 1,000 given by someone who is paid to do it. I have no doubt about that. Life is not as concrete as you might imagine. Things are decided more on the mental and emotional level than on the material one. For if you bake bread with indifference, you will bake bitter bread, which satisfies only half of a person's hunger. And if you press the grapes with ill will, your ill will distill its poison into the wine. No matter how much bread is baked throughout the world, only half of humanity's hunger is truly satisfied. All of our actions are imbued with our frustrations and our lack of goodwill. This isn't where I wanted to be. I wanted to be elsewhere and didn't want to do this. We believe that we know more than the very nature in which we should exist. We spend our entire lives fighting against nature instead of flowing together with it. This isn't what I wanted to be. I wanted to be something else. Humanity operates with the mindset that nature is chaos. It doesn't know what it's doing. It put you in the wrong place. If you were the one choosing, you would choose better. Until the moment comes when we make our own choices and realize that the best thing we had is what was given to us by nature. Are you familiar with the story of the king and the sword of Damocles? On one occasion, the king was about to judge a murderer and sentence him to death. And this criminal comes to the king and says, "You do this because you are a king. You had the opportunity to be a king. If you were in my place, you would think differently." The king then turns to him and says, "That's not a problem. Do you want to be king?" "Of course I do." "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Sit here on my throne." So the criminal sits down. The king asks him, "Are you comfortable?" "Great, very good. This is what I wanted." "Now, look up," the king says to him. There was a huge sword hanging from the ceiling of the castle, its tip positioned exactly above the king's head. "Do you see that over there? That is the sword of justice. The first mistake you make, it will fall on your head. Oh, I would be a criminal." Prison is less dangerous than this. There is no place in the world that is not dual. But we think that if we could choose, it would be better. Most of the bread that has been baked has satisfied less than half of humanity's hunger. Because all the work is done in this spirit as if it were a punishment. And even if you sing like angels, if you do not have love for singing, you close people's ears to the voices of the day and the voices of the night. It is very interesting, and you may have already noticed this, that sometimes we see a singer, an artist, who works with impeccable technique, but you don't like them. Because you sense that their voice is filled only with vanity and showmanship, that there is no heart in what is being done. Sometimes someone sings with less technique, but with so much heart that it truly moves us. Many years ago, the Argentine composer Astor Piazzolla gave a performance. And at the end, people came to praise him, telling him that he had played well. And he said, "Many times in my life I have played well, but only a few times in my life have I truly made music." Do you understand what that means? It is allowing things to be filtered through your heart. It is ensuring that things are infused with your best intentions, whether it is the humble task of baking bread or the grand endeavor of composing a symphony. We can feel this. We know when something is technical, but not human, when it lacks true quality. We sense it when an artist is merely showing off their technique, a dancer who seems more like a gymnast than a dancer, but lacks feeling in what they are doing. A singer whose virtuosity is extraordinary, but there's no feeling in their voice, conveys nothing, doesn't awaken anything. Because awakening always happens from heart to heart. If there is no heart, it may create an impact, but it does not bring about transformation in those who witness it. This is very common in our current historical moment. There are people who spend their entire lives in a city like Brasilia, vast, full of shops, bustling commerce, yet they only ever enter one store. Because there is someone there who welcomes them with care and takes pleasure in receiving them. They go to only one pharmacy, because there is a clerk there who serves them well and truly enjoys what they do. This is so rare that, sometimes, when you find such a person, you spend your whole life returning to that same place. Someone who loves what they do and overflows with joy when they see you arrive. You cross the city to go to that bakery, that pharmacy, that store. Because this is extremely rare. Basically, this is what he says about work. It is transformative for those who practice it, and for those who benefit from it. Work is the construction of oneself and, through example, gives us the opportunity to inspire others to also build themselves. The fundamental task of humanity is the construction of oneself, and, through things, he leaves a trail of transformation. You can tell who has worked on themselves as a person and who has not. By your works you shall be known. We perceive this, it is more intuitive than it seems. And if we do not carry out our work with this spirit, in the end, we have done nothing. We move things from one place to another, and over time it becomes dust. The spirit with which we do things remains and transforms the world, starting with ourselves. The history of humanity was written by those who knew how to work with love. These are the ones who make history. These are the ones who write history. Others sometimes not even the law. So, today, we will stop here. This talk was longer. Usually, they are shorter. This is the longest chapter of Gibran. A marvelous vision of what work truly is. Just imagine if we carried this spirit into everything we do. When we go to learn about time management or take other similar courses, they teach us that we have 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours to work. And for doing what we enjoy, we are left with just 2 or 3 hours. 8 hours where you simply turn on the autopilot. Even for sleeping, you're supposed to have the perfect formula. The mental state you need to have when going to sleep, certain things that are not good to have in your room, because they lower your consciousness. Even sleeping has a truly human way to be done. Imagine working 8 hours on autopilot and only having 3 hours left to fulfill myself. What kind of time management formula is that? There are time management courses that say exactly this. You manage your free time, so work becomes slave time. What kind of fruit can come from work done this way? Why can't we be free in everything we do, even when we sleep? Even in our dreams, we can learn something. We are always free if we choose to be. The ones who enslave us are ourselves, through the way we do things. All of our time is free time if we are willing to make it so.